Hey there, welcome to the channel. So who doesn't love a good casserole? Usually you have your meat, you have your starch, and you have your vegetables all in one pan in the oven. So once you get it in the oven, you're pretty much done cooking for that meal. Today, we're gonna make a teriyaki chicken casserole with rice, gluten-free of course. I'm Jamie with SavorySaver. I share gluten-free recipes, tips, tricks, and resources to make your gluten-free lifestyle easier. So let's get started. So we're starting off at the counter just briefly because I want to show you how I like to handle my chicken breast. Once we get them home from the store, Tara likes to cut all the visible fatty pieces off. You don't have to do this. I don't do it, but she likes to do that. So normally she preps the chicken and then I get it frozen. So I do have it in food saver bags. We usually do a couple breasts, so a pound to a pound and a half of chicken breast per bag, and then get it frozen. Chicken breasts cook better if they're even, of course, and you always have a bigger end and a smaller end. So what I like to do is, while it's in the bag and it still has some of the liquid in it, I usually take my meat mallet and I will level them out, or even them out rather, and get them ready to be cooked, regardless of what I have to do. If I have to chunk it up, I'm not going to, but whenever I cook it, bake it, or we grill it or whatever, we try to even it out so it cooks more evenly. The other great thing is it's in this bag. I can, knock the heck out of it, and the bag most likely is not gonna come open, so it's a little less cleanup. So let's get this done. Now that this is, nice and even, let's move on with this recipe. It's super easy, guys. The next step is to make our quick teriyaki sauce for this recipe. So I'm gonna take 3/4 of a cup of low sodium gluten-free soy sauce and add it to the pot. Gluten-free soy sauce is pretty easy to find in the grocery stores now. Read the ingredients, of course, and I will link below to a brand that is gluten-free in case you can't find it near you. I'm also gonna add half a cup of water. The recipe calls for a half teaspoon of minced garlic, which is probably 1 clove or so. We don't tend to measure garlic in this house if I don't have to. That's probably a teaspoon to a teaspoon and a half, but I'm okay with that. I'm also kind of cheating. I'm using the stuff in the jar, and it's not my favorite, but I was mad at the grocery store because of garlic prices being stupid high right now. So a while back, I bought this at Sam's. Very cost effective and not as good as fresh, but I'll take it. I'm gonna add half a teaspoon of ground ginger, and if you had fresh, you could probably grate, maybe half an inch or so off a knob of ginger and use that. I'm also gonna add 1/4 of a cup of brown sugar, and I have lightly packed it. I haven't packed it as tight as I would if I was baking. I'm gonna give everything a whisk. So the recipe that this was inspired from is Life in the Loft House, and I will link below to the original recipe, and ingredients will be listed below as well. The recipe said to cover it and bring it to a boil. I'm not gonna mess with the covering it. It's something else to wash, and I don't really feel that it's necessary. So I am gonna bring it to a boil though, over medium-high heat. Once it comes to a boil, I'm gonna let it boil for about a minute. And while this is coming up to a boil, I've got 2 tablespoons of cornstarch. I'm gonna mix in 2 tablespoons of cold water. So let's just mix that together, put this to the side, and then give it another quick mix before we add it to the sauce, because that cornstarch is going to want to settle down to the bottom of that bowl. It's not going to take long for the rest of the recipe to come together, so I'm going to put my oven on to 350 degrees and let that preheat while we finish up. So while our sauce is coming up to a boil, let me show you how easy the rest of this recipe is. So I've got a 13x9 dish, and I have sprayed it with cooking spray and put my chicken breast into the pan. Now I'm gonna get some vegetables in there. The original recipe called for 12 ounces of stir-fried vegetables in one of those bags that you get from the produce department. I don't usually buy those. It's usually more expensive, and I usually have stir-fry ingredients on hand. So I'm gonna sprinkle in about half of a bell pepper. You could use as much bell pepper if you want, as you wanted, as well as swap out any of this stuff that you don't like. I've got half of a small onion that I've sliced, so I'm gonna put that all around. Next, I'm gonna add some frozen broccoli. It's gonna add a little more liquid to the dish, but I think we'll be all right. I'm gonna put in some of that. You would typically see this in stir-fry vegetables, of course. I've got some peas and carrots here that are frozen. Since they're gonna cook pretty fast, there's one more step of the recipe, of course, because I've got 3 cups of rice over here that's already cooked, and we're not gonna add it just yet. So when I add the rice, I'm gonna add some peas and carrots, and that'll just cook them up pretty fast. So for now, this is all we need to do. So let's move back over to our sauce and finish it up so we can get it over the chicken and get it in the oven. All right, guys, this didn't take any time. We are up to a boil, so I'm gonna set the timer for a minute. It's gonna boil off some of that water, and then after a minute, we'll get that cornstarch in there. All right, give this a good stir again. Let's add it in and then whisk it together. And once it thickens, which should not take very long at all, we'll get it removed from the heat. Now it's already started to thicken. It really started thickening as soon as I put it in there, but I'm gonna bring it up just to a bubble again. That's it. It's already thickened. See how it's clinging to the spoon? I think we're good. So I've taken our sauce and just poured it back into my measuring cup. It makes about 1.5 cups of sauce right in there. So you want to take about 1 cup of the sauce, and we're going to pour it over the chicken and the vegetables. All right, that's about right. I got about 1/2 cup left. We're going to reserve that 1/2 cup for the finished dish to drizzle over the top. Now I've got my aluminum foil, and I'm going to cover this up. Now that it's covered in foil, it's going to take about 40 minutes in total to cook through. So I'm going to cook it for about 30 minutes. The chicken hopefully will be just about done at that point, and then we will get the other stuff into this dish so we can finish it off. So it's been 35 minutes and our chicken should be done. I went a little bit longer than the 30 because it wasn't quite cooked through. Should be a temperature of 165 degrees. Now it says to remove the chicken breast and shred it. I've got my meat chopper. I'm gonna see how that works first. I'm hoping this is a little bit easier to get through the chicken without making a mess. So the meat chopper did a pretty good job. I'm just gonna get them with the forks anyway, just to break it up a little bit more. But if you were just using 2 forks, I would totally leave it in this dish and do it in the dish. I wouldn't worry about taking it out. Just more stuff to clean. Now let's add some peas and carrots. I'm just gonna sprinkle them in, as much or as little as you'd like. I'm gonna mix that all in first just to coat everything. Now let's add 3 cups of cooked rice. I made this yesterday to help myself out a little bit today. You could probably use the bagged rice that you get that you just put in the microwave. A couple bags of that would probably work great. Use whatever kind of rice you like. I'm using just jasmine rice today. As you can see, this makes a lot, so it's gonna feed your family for a couple days probably. Let's get everything a stir again. And then we'll see how much liquid we're working with. Guys, this looks pretty good to me. I'm just gonna add a couple spoonfuls of that teriyaki sauce. So let's stir that in, and then the rest we will just use as needed. You don't want anything too salty, and there's a lot of soy sauce in the recipe. So it's a whole lot easier to add it later if anyone specifically wants it. All right, guys, pretty much done, but I am gonna pop it back in the oven for 10 more minutes just to warm the rice through along with those peas and carrots. Okay, let's try our chicken teriyaki casserole. Try to get a little bit of everything in each bite, or in a bite. All right, I think that's the perfect bite. I think I have everything in it. Okay, evidently it's either a pepper or a carrot, but both are not gonna fly. Very good. Everything's cooked through. Those carrots and peas, plenty of time for those to heat up in about 10 minutes. The broccoli kind of still has a little bit of crunch to it, so you can put that in frozen. That's perfect time for that. Chicken's tender, cooked through. This is not too salty, and that was my concern. You know, 3/4 of a cup of soy sauce going into a recipe, that's a lot. But we do have extra sauce. That's probably 1/4 cup or so of sauce. So let me just put a little bit on there, because again, I don't want it too salty. So I just put a little bit on there. I'm actually gonna try that whole piece or whole bite and see what it does. Still not too salty for me. So definitely use that extra to drizzle over the top. Maybe just a teaspoon or so per serving, you know, depending on how much flavor extra you want. Guys, gluten-free teriyaki chicken and rice casserole. What do you guys think? Easy recipe. We still have plenty of casserole left. So this is gonna feed your whole family, and depending on how big your family is, some leftovers as well. Super affordable, pound of chicken breast, rice is inexpensive overall, and the veggies are what you decide to put in it. So not a whole lot of cost involved. I'm sure you could probably eat for about $10 on this meal, maybe a little less. Guys, that's all I have for today. I want to thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.